Well, hello and welcome to another guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and I have a treat for you because this is a topic we don't talk about very often. However, it's really, really important. As a matter of fact, I think there are probably statistics around this. I did not look them up, but our guest could probably tell us what they are, which is suicide rate and the rate of mental health issues that attorneys turning to drugs, alcohol, things like that in order to deal, because being a lawyer is stressful. Being a lawyer, it has a lot of demands, and especially if you're coming from a big law firm where maybe if you're earlier in the food chain, they don't treat you very nicely, and you're just a cog in the wheel. But then you decide to start your own business, and starting your own business or owning your own law firm has its own set of pressures and demands on you that perhaps you weren't ready for, or perhaps you didn't realize how much it would be. And now you're in it and you need to deal with it. You need to cope. Our guest today is Traci Cipriano. She's a psychologist and an attorney and an author. So she wrote the book, The Thriving Lawyer, a multidimensional model of well-being for a sustainable legal profession. It is used in law schools, and it is also used by lawyers to read her process and her system for being able to address well-being. The book serves as a resource for promoting well-being and culture change in the legal community by educating about pertinent issues impacting lawyers and how to address them. It's a roadmap highlighting the many overarching and interconnected aspects of well-being and enabling readers to identify and target the issues most relevant to their unique situations. And my understanding is Tracy is no longer a practicing attorney. She kind of switched gears and turned to becoming a psychologist and helping attorneys in this way. So I'm excited to jump into a conversation with her on this topic. And I think that folks, you're in for a treat. Tracy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Moshe. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. And I want to just take a moment. Very first thing I do with any of my guests is my audience wants to know who you are. Some of them may have read your book and may know about you, and many of them may have never heard of you. So let's just take a little bit of time to talk about your background, your story, and how you ended up working with lawyers and helping lawyers with their coping skills and mental health issues.
Sure, it's a great question. I have longstanding interest in psychology and law policy, dating back to my undergrad days. And early on, I decided to take the law school route. There are many things I like about law. I enjoy legal issues, problem solving, research writing, crafting a good argument, all of that. But there are aspects of the day-to-day practice that I didn't enjoy. And then in terms of my style and my way of relating to the world, I tend to be more of a collaborative person. So I found that adversarial process to be more of a drain. Some people really enjoy it and thrive on it. I didn't. So after a lot of thought, I decided I would shift gears and made the decision to return to graduate school for my doctorate in clinical psychology. And it was a tough decision to make, but I haven't looked back since. And it was there that I focused on my interest in the mind-body connection, stress and health, how it impacts you. And I used some of the knowledge I learned from law school and practicing as a lawyer to inform some of my research. I was looking at work-family stress and how it influences physical and psychological health. In my master's research, I was part of a data collection at a large Connecticut corporation or their health promotion projects. And then my dissertation study, I collected data from attorneys in a variety of settings. I was looking at the work-family conflict, work-family interference, how these things influence physical and psychological health. I was also interested in how personal traits such as perfectionism and optimism influence that relationship. And probably the most interesting finding had to do with perfectionism. I found that those lawyers who had the highest levels of negative perfectionism and the highest levels of work interference with their family, that their overall distress levels were in the 89th percentile. And so that means that they're more distressed than 89% of the US population. And so that work was really the beginning of my trajectory toward, promoting well-being in the legal community, and which culminated in the publication of my book this summer.
Awesome. So, I mean, where do we start with this conversation? Well, let's start here. How does somebody know if they are super stressed out? If they're, I mean, you called it a distress level, right? Like, how do they know if their distress level is too high? Is there signs and symptoms of that? Is there a tool? I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm also a paramedic. So I know when I go on a 911 call for a medical emergency, I can take somebody's blood pressure to know if their pressure is too high or too low, right? I could take their pulse to see if it's too high or too low. How do you measure distress level?
Well, that is one way of measuring physiological responses. Your heart rate, is your breathing more shallow? Are your muscles tense? Do you chronically have neck aches, back pain, your shoulder strain? Do you have difficulty concentrating? Is your memory not quite as what it used to be? There are a lot of things. Are you more irritable? Do you find that you kind of lose your temper more easily? Little things bother you more than they might? Are people saying something to you that, hey, you don't quite seem yourself? Those are some basic measures there. And then there's mood. How's your mood? Are you having recurrent thoughts that you can't seem to get out of your head? Those are a few things.
Okay. So walk me through you have a system or something that you've come up with to help people deal with this. So walk me through the overall structure of that so that we can jump into a conversation around it.
Right. I don't have a system.
Mm-hmm.
I did develop a model. In my mind, well-being and getting there, it's different for everyone. We all have different needs. We all have different circumstances. So when I work with you or someone else, it would be a very individualized approach depending upon your needs, your circumstances, your workplace, all of that. But in my book, I wanted to help people to think more broadly about well-being. When we think about well-being, the first thing that comes to mind is self-care. But before we can even engage in self-care, we need to understand why. Why is it important? How does stress impact us? It has impacts. Long-term chronic stress influences our mood and our mental health. It also impacts our cognitive functioning, our memory, and our concentration. And there are also health consequences. It can, over time, long-term stress affects your immune system. So you're more susceptible to viral infections, bacterial infections, and then some serious health issues, such as autoimmune disorders, cardiovascular disease, cancers. There are lots of health issues. So there are reasons on the health level why you need to pay attention. And then there are also professional liability concerns. And one of the reasons the legal profession is interested in wellness is because if you're not taking care of yourself and you're kind of strung out or you're coming to work with a substance use problem, you're more likely to get in trouble in terms of your professional liability. And then there are insurance costs. If you run a firm and people are not, if they're stressed out and it's coming out through their physical health, and your insurance costs may also be higher if people are not healthy. So there are a lot of reasons why you want to pay attention to it. So that part of the idea is, why do I care? And then once you do care, well, what do I do about it? So how are you able to pay attention to what's going on within you, physically, psychologically? Lawyers are very externally focused. Right? You learn that early on, and you don't want to pay attention to your emotions. They represent weakness, and so you're trained to focus externally, and that's to the detriment of your own self-care. And then there are other factors that play as well, as what is your work environment like? What are your work demands? What are your billable hour requirements? How do people treat each other at work? If you're a young associate, do you get any mentoring? Do you feel safe raising issues, asking questions? Do you get feedback? What are you doing in terms of balancing your work and professional responsibilities? And are you able to manage them both adequately? All right, what are you doing in terms of maintaining healthy relationships? There was an article in the Harvard Business Review, I think it was 2018, talking about a study that found that lawyers are the loneliest profession. And so what are lawyers doing what can we do to help people to connect? Because loneliness is another risk factor for mental health issues, physical health problems, even early death. And it also impacts your ability to focus on your work. And then there's a financial component as well. Financial stress compounds any other stress in your workplace, and many law students graduate with debt these days, and how are they managing that? And then just you're thinking about, I didn't talk about meaning. What finances is your goal? Just to make as much money as you can to the exclusion of all else, to exclusion of meaning in your life, to the exclusion of relationships, to the exclusion of a healthy work environment? Where does that come into play? And then meaning. We all need a reason to get up in the morning, and it could be in the subject matter of your work. It could be being part of a team, or you can get that meaning from something external. It could be your relationships, your spiritual life, or volunteer work you do. But we all need to have that sense of meaning in our life. So all of these things are important when we think about well-being. And for different people, you might want to focus on different areas.
So what I heard you share is that there are certain things like self-care or loneliness or meaning that if you lack those, they could be not only a sign, but also a precipitator or an accelerant to mental health issues, stress levels, distress levels, and things like that, which you've given a really good portrait of what happens if your distress level is too high. It could have compounding effects on your relationships, on your physical health, and create all kinds of complexity, which includes even increasing financial stresses because of professional liability and health insurance costs and things like that. So not to mention missed days at work because you're sick.
Right.
Right. So
or
when
being
we look
at
at
work
the
and
three,
not getting anything done. Sorry to
right,
interrupt.
exactly. When your billable hours are empty hours, it becomes a problem. So I want to look at the three. There were three things that you mentioned as kind of like precipitators or accelerants of this, and I want to look at each of those with you and see if we can come up with perhaps some strategies for identification and for fixing. Starting with self-care. You mentioned self-care a number of times, and I think that when somebody is in a stressful situation, it becomes even more difficult to focus on self-care than normal, right? So because if you're stressed out, chances are you don't have time available to you, and you don't have financial resources available to you, because that's all part of why you're stressed. So if I don't have time and I don't have money, how am I going to get out of this vicious cycle of ignoring myself in this process, right? And I think that a lot of people can relate to this, because they know that, like, oh, I would go to the gym if I had time to go to the gym. I would make myself a healthy meal if I had time to prep food or go grocery shopping, but I don't have the time. Or if I had the money to do that, instead I'm subsisting on McDonald's when I can get it, and that's it. So if somebody's in that situation, how do they get out of the vicious cycle and start to focus on their self-care? Do you have any tips, tricks for that, resources to get somebody going in the right direction?
Well, we can't invent time. I wish I could, but can't do that. I think one of the things
if you could, we'd be having a totally different conversation,
we
right?
we would. We need to figure out how to create more time. And I know you think, yeah, right. But you're exactly right. When you're feeling like you have too much to do, it's very hard to step back and take a break. But it's important to do that, because it's likely you're not efficient. If you're not giving yourself that time to take a break, you're not being efficient. You're not on top of your game. You're not thinking as clearly. You're not thinking as quickly. And you will find that if you give yourself a break, you're probably going to get your work done a lot quicker and better. And it's hard to imagine that until you actually give yourself the permission to take the break. So perhaps start small with something with lower stakes and take the break and see how it works. And then you can build from there. There's the question of priorities. I mean, are you taking on every single case possible, no matter what? Do you really need to take on every single case possible? Or do you need to be a little more discretionary in what you take on? I mean, there are a lot of things to think about in that sense. If you are doing takeout, can you get something healthier? Can you get Panera instead of McDonald's? What are things that you can do in that way? it's hard to talk hypothetically, but those are some ideas.
Yeah, my health coach would argue that Panera is not a healthy option, but
Well,
it's definitely healthier than McDonald's, right? So like
right.
we're on a scale here,
Right.
and if you can improve in one direction, that's definitely an improvement. Um, yeah, I look, I think that you're absolutely right, and we make time for the things that we want to make time for. Um, when you're in this vicious cycle, it's hard to exit out of it. But I definitely have a number of times where I decided that I'm going to focus on something. One time I decided that I'm going to compete in a sprint triathlon. And what that did is it gave me, and it was 8 weeks before the race, right? So it's not like, oh, I was getting into this long-term commitment. For 8 weeks, I needed to focus an hour and a half of my day on physical activity in order to prepare for it. I found a podcast on triathlon training, and in it, he talked about how he has this beginner, 8-week training program, which I turned around and purchased and just followed his program. And for 8 weeks, I made that a priority. And I was able to push off other things and move other things around to make that happen. When I work with our law firm clients, one of the first things that we deal with is time management, because they can't do the exercises I'm telling them to do because it takes time. So the first thing we have to do is we have to free some time up. I even have a program called Reclaim an Hour a Day, which is basically intended to give you that hour to work on your business versus in your business. But I would argue that the same way you can create that 1 hour, you can create a second hour as well, to get physically active, to start focusing on yourself, or even doing a better job with being more intentional with what fuel you put in your body, what you eat, or being more intentional with getting sleep. So there's a lot of areas of self-care that you could focus on. But it all comes with just making a decision that I want to make a change.
Right.
And I think that if you decide that this is important to you, which hopefully our conversation right now that I'm having with Tracy, hopefully that conversation is enough to highlight this and bring it to the forefront and say, hey, this is really something that you need to focus on, because it spirals, it gets worse. And if you don't stop the spiral, you're going to end up with cardiovascular disease or cancer, or some really disastrous, situation with your muscles and joints. And it could have all been prevented had you taken the time right now to just say, okay, this is important for me, and I'm going to start doing this. And even if it's something small, like I'm going to take a 15-minute walk before I go into work. I'm going to, if you have young kids, I'm going to get the kids off to school, and I'm going to change from rushing out of the house, jump in the car to drive to the office, or rushing to my office if you're working virtually to get to work and start reading my emails, to, hey, I'm just going to take 15 minutes. I'm going to walk around the neighborhood, and I'm going to come back and clear. My head will get cleared. I will feel good because I started getting that physical activity in. And now I can start work. Then there's other things about the way you operate at work. Like, why are you starting off checking your email messages? Right? So many of us start our day that way, but it's the worst way from a productivity standpoint to start your day. If you start with reading your emails, you get lost in the black hole of response for the next 3 hours, when instead you want to own your day. You want to have a list of things that you're going to do. And at some point, your emails need to get checked, whether it's you or an assistant checking them. And we can argue that it should be an executive assistant. But at some point, you can check your email. But why not start with something productive? Why not start with something on your to-do list, knocking it out and knowing I've already started to own this day. And now I can jump in and I can be more proactive and more specific in who I'm going to respond to, how I'm going to respond to them, instead of getting lost in the process. So hopefully, from my perspective, that's some things that you can do, piggybacking on what Tracy shared, to start moving the needle on self-care, which all begins with just making the decision that you want to do something about it. You have anything to add on this before I jump into our next one?
I do think that making the decision, making the commitment, being intentional are key. You can't say, I'll get to it. I'll get to it eventually. I'll get to it tomorrow. It's that deliberate piece that's so important, and setting up specific things, setting up factors that make you accountable, and specific steps to take are important part of that change.
Awesome. Now, the second thing that you shared was loneliness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or said the opposite way, community, right? Having
Mm-hmm.
some sort of social relationship or interaction, a place where you meet others, and have involvement with others is extremely important. What are you finding there when it comes to the legal community? Why are they lonely, and is there how do we get them out of that?
There are a few things at play. One is simply time and being busy. Some of it's burnout, not having the energy to deal with relationships at the end of the day. And some of it has to just do with the threatening nature of being vulnerable. We need to be vulnerable to create intimacy. And when you're in that adversarial role, it's hard to make space for intimacy and vulnerability. So all of those things come into play. And I think again, with anything, you start small, you try to have more conversations in the office that aren't just practical. Something like, how's your day going? Just some small chit chat. Try to take those 15-minute walks with someone in your office, find someone to do that with you. Try to grab lunch. I mean, many people just work through lunch. Try to have lunch with people once a week, even. Doing small things in the workplace, trying to have some activities outside of work with colleagues or others that are to build that sense of community in the office. So you're not always just talking about work. And then there are things you can do outside of work completely to build relationships outside of work as well.
Yeah, I love the ideas that you're sharing with doing things strategically that we already discussed you doing, right? Like, you need to get more physically active. You need maybe even taking just a 15-minute walk. So why not do that with somebody instead of just doing it by yourself? I love that. And the eating lunch, you got to eat lunch anyway. How
Yep.
productive do you think you really are when you're trying to eat and you're also trying to do work at the same time? How good do you think it is for your body to not be focusing on the food you're putting into it and to just be kind of like stuff in your face while you're working, right? So if we think about that, it's probably not a good practice anyway. So why not take the break, take the mental break? It'll make you more productive when you get back from lunch, and eat lunch with somebody else. So I love those ideas that you just shared, Tracy. I think that they're super powerful. The other thing is like, what if we decided to lean into something that we always wanted to do or we love doing, like a hobby or a sport or something like that? Get involved or a religious community, get involved in outside of work in something that exposes you to other people, whether it's be on a
Yeah.
softball team or play play in a football pool that where the guys get together to discuss the games and stuff like that, or to watch the games. Just become more socially involved in something that lights you up and gives you an outlet outside of work, because then it's feeding into another piece, which is the meaning that we're going to get to. So now you're kind of doubling down on both. The other thing is we're talking to probably mostly law firm owners, right? And law firm owners, you got to be networking. You got to be going out there and making connections. If you want your business to grow, a lot of that growth comes from other people knowing about you, other people getting to know you as an individual. And that requires you to go out there and to meet people, whether it's in a big networking room or whether it's having lunches with people or just sitting down for coffee. But there is connection out there that is going to help you build your business. And if you think you don't have time for it, guess what? If you continue to not do it, you will ensure that eventually you'll have time for it, because the business is not going to keep coming. And that's really like all of these strategies that we're sharing are not just solving the problem, but they're actually doing more than one thing at the same time. And I think that here's another example of something that you can do that will help you stay out of loneliness and have people that you're connecting with, communicating with, becoming friends with, that can drive the needle of your business growth. because the more that you connect with them, the more likely they are to send business your way.
Right.
Tracy, any final thoughts on this one?
Sure. Also, your person that you walk with can be your accountability buddy, or the person that you have lunch with. If you both have similar goals, that I want to eat healthier, so no, we're not going to go get the burrito. We're going to go find something healthier to eat. We're going to get a salad somewhere else. So that accountability piece is also important. It's not just you that you're accountable to. That's
Perfect. I love that. Yeah. And it works with anything, right? Like, why, if you're going to go work out, don't work out by yourself. Find somebody who wants
right.
to work out with you, get a workout buddy.
Right.
And there you have your connection and your self-care, all in one. All right. The next thing that you shared was, meaning. And this is a big one for me. Like, in order for me to start my business, I had to have a reason for it, right? It wasn't just, oh, I want to be independently wealthy, or I want to be known on stages, or I want to be visible, right? There was some reason that I started my business. For me, my story of meaning is around my experience with my grandfather. So my grandfather left Nazi Germany, lost his twin siblings and his mother in the war, came with his father. He was 11 years old when he left, via Israel, ended up here in the United States. He, as a young adult, started to work in the diamond industry, was a business owner, worked for himself, and at some point had some level of financial success in his business, got together with some cousins and purchased an apartment building in the west side of Manhattan. And in his later years, they started to turn that apartment building into co-ops. So they started to sell off individual units. And what he did was he took that money and he used it to give each of his 36 grandchildren the down payment for their first home purchase. And that really had a massive impact on my financial journey from being a young adult to today, to be able to own a home at 21. Really, which I would have never been able to do if not for that. And looking back on that experience, I realized that we have an ability to not just impact ourselves, but to impact future generations by some of the decisions that we make on our journey. And that's why I started my business, to help people with creating generational wealth, so that they can not only live their best life, but they can also help future generations live their best life as well. And that's my deeper meaning of why I do what I do, why I'm sitting here behind this microphone having this conversation with Tracy. So Tracy, when it comes to meaning, I think all of our attorneys have some level of meaning in the work that they're doing, right? Like, I'm helping clients, right?
Right.
I guess if you're a junior attorney working in a law firm, it's possible that you're doing a job that just gives you no meaning, that you're just a paper pusher. You're not even interacting with clients. You don't even understand who you're helping or how you're helping them, especially if you're dealing with large companies and things like that. But I would think that most of our law firm owners, to some level, get some level of meaning from the work that they do. How does somebody know if they're lacking in meaning? How do they figure out that, wait, I need something more. I need to, and then once they do figure that out, how do they figure out what the meaning is that they're after? Do you have exercises around this? What help us out here?
Exercise. There are different things you can do. I don't have an exercise to give you right now, but I mean, we want to ask yourself, are you someone who has trouble getting up in the morning? Are you excited to go to work? Do you feel energized when you're at work? Or is it just another thing to slog through? Do you get any pleasure or any benefit out of it whatsoever? And if not, then you need to ask yourself, well, why is that? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And is there something else I need to be doing? And you may need that job for financial reasons. So where are you going to get that meaning elsewhere? Like you mentioned, through spirituality or through doing other things. And when I was in law school, I found it a little dry, and I felt like I needed something else. And I volunteered for a shelter for victims of domestic violence. I found out they needed legal information service volunteers. And that, for me, provided me with more of a sense of meaning. And that was probably the beginning of my trajectory to shifting gears towards my clinical psychology background, but I found that I wanted to help these women on a deeper level, that there was more to it. And that provided me, helping them, provided me with that sense of satisfaction. Kind of went off course there, but it takes some exploration on your part. You need to be willing to reflect. And I can't give you a quick answer.
Yeah,
It's really being attuned to your values.
I think, based on what you're saying, I think this goes hand in hand with the other challenges that we have, right? Because if you're not taking time for self-care, if you're not taking time to take care of yourself, it's very hard to do self-reflection, right? Because you don't have time for that, and you're not making time for that. And I feel like you need to understand what's bothering you. You need to understand why you can't get up in the morning. You need to understand why you're snapping at people, why you're irritable. And at the end of the day, it comes down to a combination of these things. I'm not taking care of myself. I don't have a sense of meaning, and I'm lonely. And when I start to have all of these three things playing in together, all of a sudden I turn into a nasty, nobody wants to be around me specimen of human being, when really none of us are like that. Naturally, we're not like that, right? Like you could be a wonderful person to be around. And when you're a law firm owner and you have a team that you're interacting with or clients you're interacting with, the last thing you want is to be perceived as nasty, perceived as rude, perceived as somebody who doesn't care. You want your clients to get the feeling like you love them and you care about them and you want the best for them. You want your staff to feel that way. And the only way for that to happen is if you can step into that role and be that way genuinely. And in order to be there, you have to have all of these things working in your favor. So we really need to, it's not just all those benefits that Tracy said before, coming full circle. Why you need to solve all these things is because these are the keys to your success as a law firm owner. Because when you have clients who think that you care about them, who think that you love them, they're going to tell other people about you. When you have team members who are working for you, who think that you care about them, who think that you love them, they're going to tell other people about you. And that will bring more additional great team members to your team. So all of these things kind of like build on themselves to make your business better, to make and to make you better. And I think that when we start to look at it, it's kind of like we're either there's a book that I give out to my coaching clients when they first come on, and it's called Living Forward by Michael Hyatt and Daniel Harkavy. I don't know if you've read it, Tracy. But Living Forward is basically a book about creating a life plan for yourself. And one of the things that they talk about in this book is that when people are not being intentional about their life, they end up in this thing called drift, where you're kind of like drifting along. And when you drift, you're allowing the tides and to take you whichever direction they want. So what ends up happening is we're never stagnant. We're never staying in one place. We're either improving or we're going down. And when you're on that downward cycle, there's nothing that's going to stop it unless you proactively stop it. So it's just going to feed on itself to make it worse. But when you start being intentional to make it better, then it starts to feed on itself to make it better. And now our little steps that we took to improve are going to start to build on themselves on their own without us even needing to do anything to start to improve our situation. So I think that what we did in this conversation, Tracy, is we outlined some of the things that people need to pay attention to. And we've also talked about some ideas that they can do, simple steps to start to improve your self-care, start to improve your loneliness, start to improve your sense of meaning. And when you start to take these little steps to improve each of these, what's going to happen is you're going to break the cycle of the downward spiral that you're in, and you're going to start to increase on a positive note. And when you start to increase on a positive note, you start to elevate in that direction. Now you're moving in that direction. Now you have momentum on your side. And now you can really get out of the situation that you're in and into a more positive situation. So, folks, if you're listening to this and you think, based on our conversation and your assessment of yourself, hey, maybe I'm in a downward spiral. Maybe I'm not in a good place right now. Recognize that the best thing you can do for yourself is to just start doing one of these things. Just start doing one thing, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's making some better healthy choices, whether it's going and making sure you're eating lunch with a friend, whether it's evaluating what your meaning is and coming up with something that you can do that gives you meaning in your life. Just start doing something to start moving you in the other direction. And I think that can break the cycle and get you going. Tracy, what are your thoughts?
I think those are all terrific thoughts. I think one thing you mentioned was downtime, and that is something that lawyers do not have enough of. But I think it's important for what I call the 4 R's: resting, recharging, relaxing, resting, recharging, reflecting, and relating. So you need to, actually get the physical sleep that you need. You need time to engage in something that's meaningful, that will charge you up. You need time to be able to reflect on your goals, your priorities, your values. Are you behaving in a way that's consistent with them? And you need time to actually relate with people, because relationships are hard work. They don't just happen, and you need time to work on those.
Yeah, awesome. Love that. Tracy, so we're pretty much out of time here. It's been a great conversation, really interesting to dive into this and to look at it from that lens that you brought, which is that psychology lens. I'm going to ask you two things. Number one, can you leave our audience with one parting piece of advice or wisdom? Could be something we talked about that you just want to hone in and stress on, or maybe it's something we didn't talk about that you want to just bring up. And then the second thing is how does somebody get more information about you? Is there something that you want to promote, you want them to do as a next step? If they said, hey, this is really important to me, and I'd like to either work with Tracy or read her book or do something, what is something that you can share for them to do as a next step with getting to know you better or your material?
One thing to take away to start this process is to just stop and ask yourself, how am I feeling today? How am I feeling emotionally? How am I feeling physically? And how am I feeling cognitively? Am I thinking clearly? How's my memory? How's my focus? And if those things aren't all top notch, then you need to ask yourself, okay, what do I need to do about it? And that's where you can reach out to resources. You can certainly reach out to me. You can take a look at my book. You can reach out to other people. And I'm not sure, Moshe, what else were you asking me? Did you want me to share my website?
Yeah, sure. What's your website?
It's actually my name, Traci, Traci, Cipriano, JD, PhD, .com.
Okay, folks, we will link up both the book, The Thriving Lawyer, a multidimensional model of well-being for a sustainable legal profession, on Amazon for you in the show notes of this episode, as well as Tracy's website. So you can click that link right down in the show notes. The description of your podcast player should have a resources section with the links for you, or you can go to profitwithlaw.com. Our show notes pages are all there on our website, where you can click on the resources section. You will see everything that we discussed linked up there. Tracy, thank you so much for joining us. An amazing conversation. Folks, we are here every Thursday with a brand new episode, brand new interview with somebody who has a massive amount of expertise in some area that's going to help you with your business growth and your personal lives. And we're excited to bring those to you. Today, we brought Tracy. Next week, it's going to be another amazing expert and guest interview. So if this is your first time tuning into the show, or if you've been listening to us for a while but have not hit the subscribe button yet, we would love it if you just reach down into your podcast player, hit the subscribe button. What that's going to do is it's going to notify you or let you know when we release a new episode. We'd love to have you back as a listener next week for our next guest interview. Take care, enjoy your weekend, and I hope that you make strides in your self-care, in your relationships, and in your sense of meaning. And you are able to live not just your best life in your law firm, but live your best life all around for the rest of it. I really want the best for each of you. And this was a great conversation. Really appreciate Tracy coming here and talking about it. Take care, folks.
Thank you, Moshe.